Once the Progress docks to the Piers docking compartment about 33 minutes from now, the hooks will close between the two docking interfaces, forming a hard mate between the vehicles. There will be about 3 orbits or 3 hours worth of leak checks that will be performed by Oleg Kononenko and Alexei Ovchinin on the Piers docking compartment side of the docking interface between the Progress and the International Space Station before hatches are open to enable the crew members to begin unloading the most critical hardware and most of the scientific and spare parts supplies that are being carried up on the Progress today. As the International Space Station flies 254 miles over the Atlantic Ocean, moving from southwest to northeast, approaching the west coast of Africa, cameras on board the International Space Station tracking the Progress vehicle as it begins to enter the neighborhood of the International Space Station for a fly-around. And for a few moments of station keeping, there's our first view of the Progress against the limb of the Earth. The station keeping will take place at a range of about 210 meters between the Progress itself and the International Space Station. That typically lasts just a few moments to enable the flight controllers in Korolyov to assess the status of the systems on the resupply vehicle before the command is given for final approach for contact and capture. At the moment, the Progress is executing a series of pre-programmed engine firings called impulse burns, small thruster firings from the engine that will enable the Progress to more precisely fine-tune its course to the International Space Station. Again, this is the view from truss cameras on the space station of the Progress as it begins the final minutes of a 2-orbit rendezvous that will result in a docking to the Piers docking compartment just under 30 minutes from now.
Starboard 5, Delta 2. That location is currently full, and so I'd look for either another stowage location or I can offer up something I could remove from Delta 2 and put in Charlie 2, which does have some space, but Charlie 2 is just a little too thin to fit the actual Rowie in.
Okay, thanks. We're happy to take your suggestion.
And this view from the Progress vehicle of the International Space Station, you can see in the lower left-hand corner, 1.7 kilometers now separating the Progress from its destination at the International Space Station, closing at a rate of about 4.3 meters per second. At the time of docking itself, that rate of closure will be reduced to just 1/10 of a meter per second. At the point of contact and capture, the relative motion between the two vehicles will have to dampen out. That'll usually take a minute or so. And then the forward docking probe will be retracted on the Progress to literally pull itself to a flush hard mate with the docking surface at the docking port of the Piers docking compartment itself. The International Space Station in progress, flying just about 1.3 kilometers apart from one another at the moment, are approaching the west coast of Africa, soon to fly over Morocco, just to the south of Casablanca. The Progress is the first of 3 resupply ships that will be delivering cargo and scientific hardware to the International Space Station. Next up in 2 weeks is the launch on April 17th of the Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft atop an Antares rocket from the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. The SS Roger Chaffee, as it is dubbed, will be captured robotically and installed and bolted into place on the Earth-facing side of the Unity module on April 19th, followed about a week or so later by the launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket to bring the next unpiloted Dragon cargo ship to the International Space Station. Progress now just 1 kilometer away from its docking to the Piers docking compartment. Docking scheduled about 26 minutes from now. We are about 4.5 minutes away from the start of the fly-around by the Progress. Again, this will be a fly-around angle of about 57 degrees, starting at a range of about 400 meters between the Progress itself and the International Space Station, resulting in a station-keeping procedure, basically the Progress putting the brakes on for a couple of minutes of systems checks before the command is given to initiate final approach for docking. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Rick Henfling has discussed system status with his Russian Shift Flight Director counterpart at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. Everything is in good shape and in readiness. All positions are go for docking. The International Space Station and Progress currently flying just to the south of Casablanca. 580 meters separating the 2 vehicles.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2, just for situational awareness. Progress is about 500 meters away.
Copy, thank you.
Spacecraft communicator Andreas Mogensen of the European Space Agency informing the crew on board the station that they have a automated visitor in the neighborhood. Progress now just 450 meters away from the International Space Station as we stand by for the initiation of the unpiloted cargo ship's fly-around of the complex. Over the Mediterranean, the fly-around of the International Space Station now underway. And you can see the progress in the field of view as it continues its inexorable approach for a docking that is scheduled just about 20 minutes from now. Again, this fly around of the station will last for just a few minutes, resulting in station keeping for a very brief period of time to enable the Russian flight control team in Korolyov to assess the Progress's systems before they reinitiate the automated approach for contact and capture. "250 meters now separating the Progress from the International Space Station as it flies from southwest to northeast over Central Europe. Everything going very smoothly with docking scheduled about 17 minutes from now. Just 3 hours and 6 minutes ago, this vehicle sat on a launch pad in Central Asia and now is in the final stages of completing the second two-orbit rendezvous to provide an expedited express delivery run to the International Outpost. We're in a handover between satellites on the tracking and data relay satellite system. Everything continuing to proceed on track for the link up of the Progress resupply vehicle, the ISS Progress 72, carrying 3,375 pounds of propellant, 104 pounds of oxygen and air, 926 pounds of water, 3,117 pounds of resupply items, including spare parts and other supplies. A total of 3.7 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the Expedition 59 crew about to be delivered to the International Space Station. Good view of the Progress resupply vehicle flying over the Ukraine, currently station keeping. Again, this hold position at a range of about 210 meters, designed to enable the flight control team at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov to assess the status of the Progress's systems before the final approach is initiated. And final approach now initiated. Now the view from the Progress resupply vehicle. You can see again in the lower left-hand corner the distance, now 116 meters and closing. Currently closing at a rate of 0.66 meters per second. Excellent view of the Progress flying over southern Russia at an altitude of 254 statute miles. All of the Progress systems performing perfectly so far. In the middle of the crosshairs, you will see in time the alignment of that center point of the crosshairs with the docking target that's just underneath the docking port on the Piers docking compartment that you're looking at. That all negotiated by the Corps' automated rendezvous system that essentially bounces signals back and forth to a corresponding antenna on the Russian segment of the International Space Station to update navigational information for the Progress's computers, as it does for the Soyuz piloted vehicles during final approach. 60 meters now separating Progress and the station. The International Space Station and the Progress now flying over northwest Kazakhstan, several hundred kilometers north of where this vehicle launched from just over 3 hours ago. And the Progress now, and as well as the station, about to move into an orbital sunset. Less than 50 meters now until docking. And thruster firings very visible as the last vestiges of sunlight on this pass for the Progress vehicle glint off of its fuselage. Flying just to the south of the newly named capital of Kazakhstan, Nur-Sultan.
I would like to have you go to work with the AGC a little bit to improve the contrast. Oleg, it is up for you. Please work with the AGC mode so that you can see better. Copy.
Олег, сейчас света от фары будет наверняка достаточно.
Oleg, I think this headlight will be on, and the light from the headlight will be quite enough. So I will activate the Rabota operation, and we'll work with the AGC. So the range is 30 meters according to my evaluation. PPS initial, I am activating Rabota operation, and breakout is enabled. Copy, confirm.
И попробуйте добиться качества изображения.
And do something, Oleg, to improve the quality of the image.
Through an interpreter, you hear a conversation between the Russian flight controllers in Korolyov and Expedition 59 Commander Oleg Kononenko aboard the International Space Station as he watches the approach of the Progress on the monitor in the Zvezda service module.
On my third pressing, the AGC for some reason goes off.
Промежутки, Олег, делайте.
Oleg, could you try to maybe do it more frequently? Yeah, I am doing the intervals of 10.
Just 25 meters now separating the Progress as it hones in on the Piers docking compartment.
15. All the parameters are on the display, and I can see the electronic crosshairs. Copy. The range is 17 meters according to my ruler, and the closing rate inaudible. Copy.
15 kilometers away.
The range is 16 meters and the closing rate 0.12. Copy.
Approaching 10 meters.
The range is 12 meters, the closing rate 13, and the antenna is retracted and all parameters are nominal. Copy.
The Progress about to nestle into a docking port, and you can see on the right side of your screen is the Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft that launched in March to carry Alexei Ovchinin, Nick Hague, and Christina Cook to the International Space Station. It is docked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. The approach now down to about 1/10 of a meter per second.
5 meters. A closing rate 0.11 meters per second. Copy. 4 meters. 0.11 closing rate. The final approach parameters are nominal. Copy.
Standing by for contact and capture. Contact confirmed. Docking confirmed at 9:22 a.m. Central Time, 10:22 a.m. Eastern Time, as the International Space Station and the Progress flew 254 miles over central China. So now we'll stand by for the relative motion between the two vehicles to dampen out before the docking probe is retracted on the Progress.
The docking process is completed. So the probe retraction is completed. Copy.
The retraction of the docking probe on the Progress will enable hooks to close to form a hard mate between the two spacecraft.
Copy. In work. Deactivating recording. Andrei, you know, the docking was so soft and so smooth, we didn't feel anything at all. You know, yes, we were observing it. All the crosshairs were aligned and everything was in the center, so it was just perfect.
Скорость касания практически чуть меньше 1/10 было.
You know, the rate of the contact was less than 0.1 meters per second. Copy. Yeah, so it was moving absolutely exactly how it should be, and the docking was very soft. You know, from the very beginning, from the launch and until the docking, everything was soft and smooth. Well, that's great. Alexei, this is Moscow. If you have time or when you have time, could you please downlink the recording?
Еще раз повтори.
Come again, Andrei?
Ну, после того, как ты отключишь запись,
After the recording is deactivated, could you please downlink the recordings, the data for us via OCA?
Принято. Телевидение пока
Copy.
не отключаем.
So the
Just to recap, the Progress 72 cargo craft carrying 3.7 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the Expedition 59 crew eased into port at the Piers docking compartment at 9:22 a.m. Central Time, 10:22 a.m. Eastern Time, a few minutes ahead of schedule. Docking occurred over central China to complete a textbook two-orbit, 3.5-hour journey from the launch pad at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where the launch occurred earlier today at 6:01 and 34 seconds a.m. Central, 7:01 and 34 seconds a.m. Eastern Time.
Andrei, could you please come again and repeat your last?
я хотел сказать, извините, Алексей, дергаю тебя.
Sorry, Alexei, I bother you. So it's step 8 and 9 the close-up operations, should be performed right now.
Поле, сейчас кому, Алексею или...
Nikolai, so are you talking to Alexei or are you talking to me? This is Alex. I was talking to Alexei. Copy. Sounds good. But he's working right now.
And we're standing by for the hooks to drive close to form a hard mate between the two vehicles.
Олег, тут просто прошла информация, ключевое слово заключительная операция, но это не по Тору.
Alec, the closeout operations were voiced, but it's not regarding Toro. Yeah, so I heard this final closeout operations, and that's why I decided to call you just in case.
У нас продолжается процесс стягивания.
So the probe retraction process is still on, so we are standing by. Copy.
Олег передал ваши поздравления с юбилеем первого управления.
Alec, I relate your greetings with the anniversary of the first department to the personnel, and so I will do this again tomorrow. You mean on Friday, and you will celebrate on Friday? Yes, that's right. So it will be a celebration. For the first, actually, the 1st of April was the anniversary itself.
экипаж МКС ответит СУПу Москвы для Олега.
Station Moscow, specific 1 for Oleg.
Слушай, Андрей.
Go ahead, Andrei.
Олег, процесс стягивания завершен.
Oleg, probe deflection is complete.
Заключительный.
Нет, просто переход.
Понятие. Заключительная операция.
27
страница.
close out operation, step 4.6, page 27.
This is Mission Control Houston. We now have confirmation through the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov that the Progress hooks are closed. So we now have a hard mate between Progress and the Piers docking compartment. That completes what amounted to a flawless launch to docking scenario for the 72 Progress resupply vehicle that began with its launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan about 3.5 hours ago. The Progress lifted off atop a Soyuz 2.1A booster from launch site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome at 6:01 and 34 seconds a.m. Central Time, which was 4:01 and 34 seconds p.m. Baikonur time in the late afternoon. The ascent to orbit was perfect. 8 minutes and 46 seconds after launch, the Progress separated from the third stage of the Soyuz booster and began a series of pre-programmed engine firings to enable it to fine-tune its path to the International Space Station, ultimately completing a flawless rendezvous and link-up to the Piers docking compartment a few minutes ago at 9:22 a.m. Central Time, 10:22 a.m. Eastern Time, as the Progress docked to the Piers docking compartment over central China at an altitude of 254 statute miles. So with hooks closed now, the Russian cosmonauts on the Russian segment of the station, Oleg Kononenko, the Expedition 59 commander, and Alexei Ovchinin, will begin a series of leak checks over the next 3 hours to ensure that we have a tight seal at the docking interface between Progress and Piers. That will set the stage for the opening of the hatch to the Progress vehicle a bit later today, and the start of the unloading of some of the higher priority cargo items being carried on board the resupply craft that delivered 3.7 tons of food, fuel, and supplies today on this expedited two-orbit rendezvous, the second in the history of the International Space Station. About 5.5 hours ago, just after 4 a.m. Central Time in the Quest airlock of the International Space Station, Canadian Space Agency astronaut David St. Jacques suited up in his extravehicular mobility unit with the help of Anne McLean to do a verification test of that spacesuit. Again, David St. Jacques suited up in his extravehicular mobility unit about 4 a.m. this morning. Anne McLean joining him in the equipment lock section of the Quest airlock as St. Jacques prepared his suit for the first spacewalk of his career and the third in the current series of spacewalks. He will venture outside the Quest airlock next Monday, April 8th, along with Anne McLean for a planned 6.5-hour spacewalk to lay out cables that will provide a redundant telemetry and data capability for the Canadarm2 robotic arm in the unlikely event that a technical problem would crop up that would preclude the operation of the arm. They will also lay out Ethernet cables and other cabling that ultimately will provide redundant commanding and technical capability for a variety of other systems, but most specifically the ability to continue operating the Canadarm2 robotic arm in the unlikely event of a primary technical path problem to that robotic instrument. Han McLean will be designated as EV-1 or extravehicular crew member number 1 next Monday, wearing the suit bearing the red stripes. David St. Jacques will venture out in the suit with no stripes as EV-2 or extravehicular crew member number 2. This will be the second spacewalk of McLean's career, the first for St. Jacques as he embarks on a spacewalk that will mark the 4th time a Canadian astronaut will have walked in space, following in the footsteps of Steve McLean, Chris Hadfield, and Dave Williams in years past. We'll carry all of that spacewalk coverage for you on NASA television next Monday, beginning at 5:30 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. The spacewalk, again, scheduled to begin just after 7 a.m. Central Time, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, or earlier if the crew has wrapped up its spacewalk preparations ahead of schedule. So you'll be sure to tune in for that next Monday to follow all the activities of McLean and St. Jacques outside of the International Space Station in what will be the 216th spacewalk in support of ISS assembly maintenance and upgrades. For now, that will wrap up our coverage of the flawless arrival of the Progress 72 cargo ship to the International Space Station after a textbook launch and 2-orbit rendezvous that has resulted in the Progress arriving for an docking to the Pirs docking compartment. Its cargo soon to be unloaded by Russian cosmonauts Oleg Kononenko and Alexei Ovchinin. For now, we'll wrap up our coverage from Mission Control here in Houston. Have a good day, and we'll be sure to see you on Monday for the spacewalk by McLean and St. Jacques. This is Mission Control Houston.